This is a 3-inch smartphone, and I think it's the perfect dumb phone. So to explain what I mean by that, we've got to rewind a little bit and first sort of start off with why I went down this rabbit hole in the first place. And it was a time I remember it vividly. I was in my kitchen and my kids were trying to get my attention and I was scrolling on my phone. And that wasn't the devastating part of this. The devastating part of that was realizing how normal it was to them. They weren't even annoyed. They were just waiting. And there was something about just sort of noticing that at that point in time that made me start on this journey, which was to sort of look into, obviously, on this channel, I do a lot of community deep dives, and I sort of went into the dumb phone community to try and solve this problem. And it turns out there's this digital minimalism idea, which is a book by Cal Newport, and he also did a book called Deep Work. Both of these are really incredible, articulate academic deep dives into the problem that we find ourselves in that I think the technology of smartphones is actually betraying us. We buy them for one thing, yet we end up not wanting to do the thing that we find ourselves doing with them, which is spending far too long on them doing stuff that isn't really that productive. So Unihertz did send me this Jelly Star for free, but they didn't reach out to me. I reached out to them. I was actually going to buy this. This was my next move, and I thought I would just ask because I want to talk about this on the channel. So I thought I'd reach out to them and just see if they were happy to send me the phone for free anyway, and they were in exchange for this video. Now they don't have any input into this video at all. No money is changing hands, and they're happy for me just to publish it. So I'm literally just talking about this from my own personal experience. I would have bought this. Had I paid full price for it, I would have been just as happy with this as I am as a result of them sending it to me for free. So the first part of this for me was actually just to sort of phase the idea of a smartphone out completely. And I actually reinstated my old 2G Nokia dumb phone. And I really sort of embraced this idea of the dumb phone to try and solve this problem. And I went as far as sort of building this app that ran on my Mac that was an SMS assistant interface, and it could give me directions and things. So all of the sort of barriers that most people find when they try the dumb phone thing, I tried to solve through this SMS interface going to my computer. That was a fascinating experiment, and it really sort of made me realize where the real value in a smartphone is. And there are so many of these really useful things that we want from a smartphone, and this is where the dumb phone community sort of gets itself tied up in knots a little bit, because they try and find this perfect dumb phone. So they look at the feature phones and they try and find a feature phone that has this set of requirements. It usually involves WhatsApp, it usually involves maps and music. So before you know it, you end up with sort of basically a smartphone, but what they mean is they don't want this sort of temptation, this sort of infinite scrolling algorithm, addictive nature of smartphones. So if we flip this on its head and stop trying to remove features to try and solve this problem, and actually just think the screen size is the issue. When smartphones were first released, they had quite small screens. They solved a problem. They stopped us having to carry a PDA around at the same time as a mobile phone. That immediately started to resonate with lots of people. And from there, we just saw the industry push for bigger and bigger and bigger screens, because of course it's obvious the bigger the screen, the longer we're going to spend on those devices. And the longer we spend on those devices, the more money that whole industry makes. So we know how we got here. And we also know that so many people are becoming aware of this and recognizing it as something they want to solve. There was a video by the Harvard Business Review, 12 million views in a couple of months, about embracing boredom and putting down your phone. This is clearly something that loads of people recognize. They feel betrayed by the technology and they want to see a solution. And I think the Jelly Star really is the closest we've got to this solution. And what's really interesting is the way that I sort of see this device now. I see it as a superior solution to those things like the little AI devices, the Humane pin and the rabbit, whatever it was. These failed devices where the idea was that we would have an AI-driven tiny device. Well, this is almost that, but in a way that doesn't mean you have to get rid of your smartphone. It's so small. It is just filling that role of a tiny device that's always with you, with full access to all of the modern AI stuff. So I think it's really interesting to frame it like that. But it also, for me, in my mind, I see this like a sort of modern pager. So for inbound urgent messaging, I kind of see this as this is where one of the real sort of value points of a smartphone is, this idea that anyone can message you with an urgent message instead of having to phone you. I think that was actually a beneficial shift. So this idea of it being sort of small like a pager, small like one of these AI devices, but actually still have all of the app store kind of utility that smartphones are really good for, embracing the hardware element of this thing, like the biometric authentication, the Bluetooth, this sort of idea that it's a fully portable device with GPS and all these other kinds of things. You can plug it into your car and it can power that system, and it is your sort of gateway to the internet. And with AI the way it is now, quite often the case is actually, it's all you really need is just sort of a speaker and a microphone so that you can just talk into this thing. So it's really interesting to me how it sort of seems to fit into all of those positions now. So this is a fully fledged Android smartphone. It runs Android 13 and it has a 3-inch screen. And you think that just seems so crazy when you see the size of normal phones. I came from the 2016 iPhone SE. This was my sort of, this was my bridging point between the dumb phone and how I got to here. I thought the 2016 iPhone SE was a pretty good shout. It was, the smallest screen I could find, the smallest kind of form factor device I could find, but still a smartphone. But of course, that device is so old that things like the eBay app and the AI apps just don't work on it, which is one of these things that we want from the smartphone. So that wasn't really a solution. But this thing is powerful and fast. It has a fast, high resolution, responsive screen. It has the camera for QR codes and of course kind of emergency pictures. And we'll touch more on that in terms of convergence devices and my Unix philosophy thinking a little bit later as well. Spoiler alert, I do see this as fully compatible with my Unix philosophy kind of approach to technology. And the really fun thing about this is it's got 256 gigabytes of storage in a device that costs £170. Just entertaining a concept like that in the iPhone world is, there's no way anything this affordable would come with that kind of storage. So you have the power. It's got 8 gigabytes of RAM. It runs multiple apps at the same time. And the hilarious thing is it actually supports the split screen mode where you can have 2 apps on the screen at once, which of course you can't even do on any iPhone. So this kind of embracing of the flexibility and the power in the Android system is actually really interesting for me as someone who's only ever had iPhones my whole life. I find this part of this experiment also very interesting. So if we frame this with my Unix philosophy idea, which I talk about a lot on this channel, where I'm really enjoying sort of seeking out devices that have only one purpose, and you think a smartphone is the exact opposite of that. And I've always felt that about smartphones. They fail on this philosophy because they try and replace so many devices. For me, I find it so much more enjoyable to have a separate camera, a separate computer. The 2017 12-inch MacBook, which I have here, is just, for me, the ultimate kind of around the house portable computer. With this, I can type on it. I can actually reply to an email on it using the keyboard. And that just means, for me, it's so much better than any smartphone would ever be. So for me, this idea that the Jelly Star has a camera, but I don't see that as redundancy. I don't see that as conflicting with the Unix philosophy, because actually the camera is a really important part of the actually useful bits of a smartphone. It can do the QR code thing, and of course, as a messaging device, it can do the video calling thing with the front-facing camera. So I think the justification for having a small camera that doesn't actually add any size or weight in a meaningful way to that device is perfectly legitimate. So what's crazy is when you do the maths on this, even when you think in terms of like, I'm carrying the Osmo Pocket 3, I'm carrying a GM1 with a small prime lens, I've bought the £200 2017 12-inch MacBook as the kind of computing device, and then the Jelly Star at about £170. That is still cheaper than the latest iPhone. So you think about this, like, it does hold up. It sounds like you're just buying loads of stuff, but it's still cheaper than what people are spending on these iPhones every few years. It's really fascinating. And the value that I get out of having all of these different devices doing their one thing and doing it well is incredible. It feels so much more fun to think about technology in this kind of a way. So switching from the iPhone to the Android ecosystem was actually really quite fascinating. It was way less problematic than I thought it was going to be. In fact, I'm really only left with the main annoyances, sort of things like the way that an iPhone would allow you to copy and paste between the Mac and the phone if you get an SMS code. So if you're logging into something and you get an SMS two-factor code come to your iPhone on the Mac, it would just show up and it would just sort of work seamlessly. And actually, it's not that bad. You can go to the messaging Google app on a desktop, and that synchronizes with the phone, and you can copy and paste the code from there. It's not like you're still having to actually type in that number. So even that is not a disaster. But overall, the Android experience has been surprisingly pleasant for me. I thought this kind of lack of the polish that you get with the iOS system would be a bit frustrating, but actually when you put a nice launcher in the Android thing, you can see my kind of main home screen looks pretty good and it feels pretty polished, and the responsiveness of this phone, it feels incredibly fast compared to my 2016 iPhone SE. This is just unreal. It feels like a modern phone to me. But what the most striking thing about this thing overall is how it redefines your sense of what a big phone feels like. Even the 2016 iPhone SE now, if I hold that in my hand, it feels mad. It feels just so big because I'm used to this 3-inch phone now. And becoming aware of just that change in your perception on this, how it just makes it so clear how effective adding the bigger and bigger screens to these devices is in terms of wanting you to pick it up and the gratification and the reward you get from using a device like that. Now, we do have to talk about downsides. So it's not a durable phone. I have to say this. I actually smashed the screen within a couple of days of having this. And that was in spite of it having the screen protector and the case. I did have it in the case. But it leaves a bit of this edge of the screen exposed. And it must have just landed on that. And you can see in the picture that it was that corner between the screen protector and the rubber case that actually took that impact. And it did just smash the screen. So I bought a new screen for it. Obviously, I hadn't even filmed any of this. I hadn't done any of the work for this video by the time I'd smashed it. And I really wanted to live with it and run with it. So I just bought the new screen. It was about £40. Like this is an unbelievably cheap replacement screen, and I replaced it myself. It was quite a fiddly job, as you know, replacing a screen on a smartphone always is. So in terms of the hardware, this thing has everything you'd kind of want from a smartphone. It's got the fingerprint sensor, which I'm not sure if it's as accurate as the old fingerprint sensors on the iPhone. I do seem to actually have to tap it a couple of times sometimes for it to work. I don't know if that's just me or what other people's experience with that is. Mostly it's not really an issue, and it allows me to use Google Pay on it, which of course is one of the main sort of useful things that smartphones have over any kind of dumb phone anyway. And of course all the AI apps run on this, and they're happy just using the two-way audio thing. Like that just all works really well. I've got banking apps, again, using that biometric authentication for access as well. So all of that real sort of smartphone utility is absolutely accessible on this device. And the surprising thing is how actually the 3-inch iPhone is not a problem for any of that stuff. All of the things that I think are where the real utility comes from with smartphones work fine on a small screen. The only thing that's beneficial with a big screen is the stuff you don't really want to be doing on a smartphone in the first place, the stuff you'd rather have just done in a more suitable time on a bigger computer. Like that's the way I see this. Any app that I've used on here has actually been fine on this 3-inch phone, and it's just crazy to me that first of all Android actually works on a device this small without any drama. But really it's just about how the small screen size does not detract from the utility of these kinds of key things, like, you know, like Google Pay or like it powering the car with Android Auto. Obviously the screen size is completely irrelevant to those kinds of things. You don't need to be lugging around something with a big screen to see that kind of utility. Now what's interesting about the Jelly Star is it also has a headphone port. So if you do want to listen to music with old cheap wired headphones, you know, you can still do that, of course. So I've actually built my own network MP3 player to share from my Mac all my music on my local network, and I can obviously play music through that with cheap in-ear monitors using the headphone port on the Jelly Star. So if you value headphone ports on small phones, you're going to love one of these. So in terms of the hardware, we've got the volume buttons on the side, and then 2 buttons on the other side, the power switch, and then this customizable button, which you can set up to do things like put the torch on with a long hold or double tap it to turn on the funky lights that are on the back of this as well. And it's got USB-C charging, and interestingly the port is on the side of the phone for that, which is, you know, obviously very unusual. And then you've got the SIM card tray, which is actually a double slot, so you can either put 2 SIM cards in it, or you can have an SD card in the other half for even more storage. You know, this kind of power and flexibility that I think the sort of the Android world are used to is really kind of fun, actually, coming from the locked down world of iPhones. So thanks as always to all of the members on this channel. Your support is so hugely appreciated. I've got an amazing sort of members perks package these days with all of my Zettelcast and notes that include sort of research and sources for all of the stuff I talk about in this video, as well as my own sort of thinking and ideas as well. And a whole bunch of these apps that I've created for you guys, which overlap with all of the themes of the things in the videos as well. So the DUMBPHONE helper scripts from my experiments there are included in there, as well as the MP3 player streaming apps and all kinds of other things, including the photo library app as well. Not everything is available to all member tiers. Obviously the master level members get access to way more, so always worth thinking about becoming a master level member if you can. And with YouTube the way it is in terms of ad revenue, that membership is just sort of more valued than ever now, so really appreciate it. So if you enjoy these videos, this is absolutely the best way you can support this channel.